Great. All right. Welcome to At Home with YouTubers. In a couple of minutes, we'll kick off the show. We're just going to wait for people to come in.
Awesomeness. There we are. I can see
Welcome to At
us.
Home with YouTubers. In a couple of minutes, we'll kick off the show. We're just going to wait for people to come in.
Ooh.
We'll need to close that down.
Yeah, you will. Okay.
All right. I just closed the Are we on YouTube now, Spielberg?
Yep.
Awesomeness. And will you let people into the Zoom link as they come on?
Yep. And we can kick off the Zoom now if you want.
Great. How do I do that?
In the top of the screen, it's got practice session. We'll just go to live.
Back to the screen. Click on live. Or broadcast.
Yeah.
Great. So we should be live on Zoom now and live on YouTube. Great. Good morning. Happy lunchtime, everybody. My name is Brad from Epic. I've got on the screen with me at the moment Michael. We refer to him as Spielberg. He's our technician at Epic who kind of sets up all of our virtual events. And I've got Matt McCormack as well from Cognizant. Hello, Matthew.
Hello.
Hello.
Yeah.
We're just waiting a few minutes for people to join. So if you are on the call, how about you jump in the chat session, say hi, where you're from, and yeah, just we'll give people a few minutes to pop on and pop in and join the call before we kick off.
Sounds good. Can stretch in the meantime, Brad.
Stretch away, Matt. It's always good to
limber up.
Oxygenate yourself, yeah?
It is. Every chance you get. That's the theory, right? Don't have your whole day like structured. You just, when you get a moment, just stretch and yeah.
Hey, Shripad from Melbourne. We're from Melbourne too. The sun's out in Melbourne, which is good.
It is.
Jamie's in Brizzy. He's on the call. Nice one.
It's a good day for a walk today.
Jamie from Brisbane, it actually was.
Hello.
And Carl from Riddles Creek. There's a question for you. There's your first question, Matt. Where's Riddles Creek?
No idea, but it sounds like they're going to be free from COVID. It's just got the vibe of a place that is probably the sun shining and the birds are chirping and people are going about their day. Yeah, well, wait, Brad, what do you think? Which can you got to
Riddles Creek sounds to me like a place with no lights, where everyone just drives around, chewing on a bit of straw, being nice to each other. It's the kind of place I want to be. Yeah,
decent view of the stars, I reckon. It's the thing you notice, you get out of the city, like if you ever do the go across the Nullarbor on the train, they stop halfway and you get out and all you can see is stars like across the whole of the sky. It's a beautiful thing. You don't realize how much the light of the city reduces your capacity to see what's up there in the evening. It's a wonderful thing to see.
True that, man. True that. I run in the mornings. I'm running at night time at the moment, like at 5:30 in the morning. And the glow of the city is really strong at that time of the night. You can always just see, especially on the no moons. Hey, by the way, I was right. Riddles Creek doesn't have any lights.
There you go.
Cool. Bernie's here as well. Good. All right. So maybe Spielberg will kick off. Are we good to go, buddy?
Yeah, sounds good.
Awesomeness. So, as I said before, guys, my name is Brad Bennett. I'm the founder and the Melbourne director for Epic. So, I get to hang out and meet lots of very interesting people and spend time with interesting people. So, during the kind of whole COVID lockdown, we aren't able to run our meetup series. So, we thought we'll think about some ideas. And one of the things we wanted to experiment with is just introducing, interesting people that we know and we've met in the industry to bigger audiences, really. My premise on this is I'm a big fan of the reinventing organizations, Frederic Laloux stuff. So around, organizations changing between different states. So, red, orange, amber, green, and teal. So really what we're looking for is all the green leaders out there. So green leaders are really value orientated. They're people who will give you really straight answers. And I know Matt, who I consider a green leader. I've known Matt probably for half a decade, I reckon.
Something like that.
something like that. We've done a few things
Yeah.
together over that time. But I think the point being is we've kept in touch with each other on probably a personal level and also a work level, because we support each other and we have similar ways of thinking and similar ways of going about and having a look at things. Matt's pretty interesting. He is the head of consulting and head of strategy for the digital business for Cognizant across APAC, so Australia, Asia, and the Middle East. Is that correct, Matthew?
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. There's a few time zones there. There's a lot of zooming in and out of countries throughout the day. It's really.
What countries have you zoomed in today?
It's morning time. So it's actually Australia in the morning, because if you think, most of them are a few hours behind. So, Hong Kong's a couple hours behind. So it's a lot of the afternoon into the evening. But a typical day would be Hong Kong, Japan, Malaysia, Singapore, India, and then kind of the UK at the tail end. And then obviously being an American headquartered company, there's a few US calls in the evening.
Yeah. Make for a long day for you, I'm sure, right?
Look, it makes for a day that you just have to balance your time in between. Right? And I think that's the exciting thing, is that and everyone working from home now, you can really structure the day as you need to. I think that's the exciting thing. If you want to go to the shops in the morning or run in the morning, do it then when you got downtime, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think our main objective today really is to, as I say, introduce green leaders for At Home with Interesting People. And today with Matt. So Matt, just with Cognizant and your role there, how long have you been with them for now?
About 2.5 years, I think, somewhere like that.
And out of the group that works with you, do you want to just break out down the digital business? How big is it? And kind of like, what are the skill sets and stuff like that?
Really broad. So there's hundreds of consultants across APAC, and they do everything from design thinking and digital strategy to kind of digital architecture and helping businesses figure out new and emerging technologies. And that's really kind of the sweet spot for us, is looking at figuring out, okay, well, you've got a business problem, how can you attack it in a new and innovative way? And that's the kind of exciting thing that keeps people motivated. So that could be looking at things like IoT and figuring out how connected products could be better integrated, looking at how you could take cost out of your business, or how you could look at potentially improving revenue. So it's a whole eclectic mix of people. If you think of just that service line, you've got some really broad skill sets and some really interesting people that are part of that kind of group that consulting across that region.
And you must obviously get introduced to lots of different people and lots of different organizations on the journey. I think place where we're both lucky, but you're particularly lucky, is you just get to see lots of different clients at different stages. So you get to probably. I reckon this job's perfect for you, because I don't reckon anyone could handle you as a full-time person. But I reckon if you have to fly across 20 or 30 accounts, then I reckon that's probably about the sweet spot. Is that a fair comment?
I think I get bored if I'm too long in one spot. I think you reach the point where, because the exciting thing with transformations is you come in early, everyone's energized, you accelerate their thinking, you help them mobilize and scale, and then the kind of the hard lifting's done, and then you want to go and look at the next exciting challenge. So yeah, I think that's fairly apt. But it's interesting, there's clients on very different stages of the journey, I'll tell you that. Like even the ones that you might look at in the market and go, gee, they seem like a fairly mature, forward-thinking organization, and you look inside and there's still so much to be done in terms of aligning everyone's way of thinking and getting the operating models right, and really helping them to scale.
Yeah, I think it's a great point, right? Like everyone is on the journey. I was speaking to some guys at some really progressive organization from a ways of working perspective across Australia, and the guys internally, and these are I won't name the companies, but perceived as the go-to companies, they'll still turn around and go, hey, we've got a long way to go. We're on the journey and we reflect. But don't think we don't have, top-down command and control behaviors, and don't think that we don't have challenges, because their perspective is they just work through them, right? They're more open to talk about them.
Yeah, well, no one's done, right? And this is the thing that people forget about digital transformations, is that there isn't really any shining example of an industry or even a company that's kind of gone, yep, we're there, we've done it. Cognizant sponsors a lot of MIT research in this area, and what they've basically found is that most companies are somewhere on a journey, and they've taken probably two main pathways. They've either gone, okay, we're either going to create all these front-end customer experiences, or we're going to modernize our core and get all our platforms right and get all our legacy stuff sorted out. That's kind of the two main paths that the majority of organizations have taken. And the overarching point from the research is that no one's done, is that everyone's still somewhere on the journey and has failed in some way. And so that's kind of like the the opening stanza I'd say is that it's an ongoing process and no one's anywhere near through it as you would think.
Yeah. I mean, I reckon the ones who are done are cashed out on the beach in the Bahamas, mate. So I reckon there's a few done, they're just not around anymore. All right,
yeah, some of the fintechs that have sold to banks and that have sailed off into the sunset, sure, but those businesses weren't optimized either.
So Matt, thanks for joining us. I'm going to ask you some questions. And
sure.
on the call, please start posting. There's a little Q&A post on there. So whack some questions in there. We can kind of see them pop up. And, this whole format is about just having a chat. So, we are more than happy to, and we will probably end up going down rabbit holes. So please post your questions and, Matt and I will have a chat about them, discuss them as they come up.
Try and stay on topic. It's very, very, very hard.
Topic, right? All right. Yeah. So from our perspective, from Epic, like we can talk about work, right? But in actual fact, before work, you've got to talk about the person. So Maddie, tell us about your morning routine. What happened this morning? What's your morning routine?
I'm loving working from home, I tell you, because you don't have the commute time. So my morning routine is you get up out of bed, you can make coffee, you're in your office space in minutes. So I think that's awesome for me. Healthy breakfast, it's the key. Mueslis, yogurt, fruits, like you got to start the day well. So for me, it's good food, get some coffee in. I got my own beans, so, and grind them up myself in the morning. So that's just a little moment of pleasure in the morning where you just, you start the day well. And
can I ask you, do you have that? Is that by yourself? Is your wife and kids there? Like, is there mat time, or what happened? How does that morning evolve?
It depends. Like, it's the work from home with the kids from home is a challenge. I think with Melbourne going back into lockdown and kids being home from school, but luckily downstairs area is kind of like workspace and upstairs is the kids' space. So that I think I'm lucky in that regard. And so we kind of use the lounge room area as the kind of work / coffee / exercise space. So yeah, that's been a nice balance.
Nice. Yeah. And are the kids also working from downstairs during the day? Like, are they kind of around?
Generally upstairs. Sometimes, I mean, this desk here, my youngest is 6, so sometimes she needs the kind of bit more of the time to support the iPad learning. The whole concept of don't worry, you can just post it online and the kids will be fine does not work. I mean, if the eldest potentially, but the youngest, I think the schools are still evolving their use of technology. And I think that even second time around, there's still a few challenges with the way that they're applying technology and trying to get kids to kind of be proactive in their learning. But I reckon it's ultimately going to build more resilient kids. And I think that is a good thing now. I noticed with mine, they're taking a bit more of an active role in structuring their day and seeing them on Zoom calls and actually. It was interesting because they finally got the concept of, all right, be quiet, dad's on a call. Like, because there was kind of the reverse was happening. For whatever reason, I was too loud on a call and my daughter's like, shh. Like, I'm on the Zoom call now, like, you're interrupting my time. So I think the penny dropped for her because she's been quieter as she's been wandering around the house now when she sees me on the phone. So I think that kind of moment was helpful.
So I totally agree. I mean, the kids have always been good at technology, but now adapting technology to learning and education has come through. The other thing I've seen is my partner is a school teacher, and the shift of teachers to adopting technology, and all the ones that were resistant, who went, "Oh, I don't have to do it," that's gone. So now technology is the form of communication, both at the senior levels as well as the young levels as well. So it's everywhere, right?
Yeah, I mean, I would say it's no different to some corporates that were struggling with the concept of allowing people to work from home and using technology in that way. Everyone's gone on that learning curve, right?
Yeah. All right. So, Maddie, another personal question. 3 hobbies. What are your top 3 hobbies?
So I'm really loving kickboxing. I did a lot of martial arts over the years, so karate, Krav Maga. Really, I love that. So still doing that at home. So actually got the kickboxing in the lounge room, you'll see over and there. So nice. That's good. The kids, I love that in between meetings, even if if client meetings not gone so well, or maybe I need to go on mute because they're just not getting the point. I can go and punch for a few minutes and then come back to the call. No, it's so that's been really good. Play a lot of music, played guitar most of my life, which is good. And actually I'm enjoying yoga and core with my partner. So we're finding we've got the mats on the floor and we kind of find just in between meetings, you know, if we just got 20 minutes, we can chuck on, you know, a yoga video, do something just to work on the body. It's that interesting because it's that blend of kind of meditative time. It's time you're spending together, but then it's also something you're doing to kind of keep your body in shape. And so I think that's been really, really awesome at the moment. Particularly because you're home a lot, you become house cats. So if you're not like really careful in finding the breaks in your schedule to do something that's for your body and for yourself, I think you just end up working the whole day and then going to bed exhausted and then getting up and doing it all again. And so there for me, they've been the 3 hobbies that I've really been focused on at the moment.
Can we have a look back at that kickboxing setup for a second? I like that, right? I reckon more senior execs and leaders need. I think everyone needs that setup. Maybe that's what we need to do.
It's yeah, I love it. And so
go on mute and go beat the shit out of that for a few minutes.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And yeah, my kids will come down and fly kick it as well, so it does create a nice atmosphere in the house. But yeah, so that's me at the moment.
Cool. That's you. So I did have a few other things I thought you were going to say, but you didn't. But good to see you doing the guitar as well. Does that creative element as well is important? You know, that
you need to kind of have that balance. I think you spend a lot of time working, so you just trying to break it down. And it's interesting. And exercise, you got to do it because I'm seeing so many clients, staff that you don't see them for a while, and then they go on video, and you realize, well, you spent a lot of time snacking during the day at home between meetings. You could just watch that sedentary lifestyle is really, that's going to be the other side of COVID that I think people just really need to be careful about. So I got the standing desk and just trying to, you know, do what you can to keep moving, right? Just little things, right? This is not going away. This work from home is here to stay. So the sooner you get your workout and your lifestyle to integrate together, the better off you'll be.
Totally agree. Before COVID, I used to have lower back problems, but now that I'm standing and moving a lot more, I actually feel stronger. And I know you could have done that in the work environment, but it was just so easy to walk into a meeting room. But now you are the meeting room, so you get to control every meeting room. So you've absolutely got control. All right.
Yeah, it's absolutely, I agree.
So we're going to jump to the next section. That's enough about you and your kickboxing. And,
fair enough.
You know, that's it. We're done with, you know. Never done, Matt. Never done. All right. So next section's in the news. So what we're going to do is I'm going to share my screen, hopefully, if that works. And we're going to talk about some stuff in the news at the moment and get your thoughts on it. So
sure.
There's a little run sheet there. So in the news, COVID-19 speeds up digital transformations by 6 years.
Sure.
6 years. You would have seen this one before. We've all seen this one do the traps.
I love that. I was actually going to make that joke. Yeah, absolutely. There's such an element of truth to that. Some of them it was always disrupt or be disrupted. That was always the mantra. You know, with clients, it's like you got to do it to yourself or it's going to happen. And I think COVID really has just accelerated that whole process. I mean, for some, it was a matter of staying in business. Now, if you look at some organizations where they were potentially more vulnerable with some of their offshore capabilities. And so as I think places like the Philippines and India went into lockdown, some of our clients had capability there that they just weren't able to access. And so overnight, they had to reinvent their business model and look at, well, where are we going to have some contact center capability onshore? How are we going to stand up some of these processes locally? Because we just simply can't function because of the way that the virus had locked down certain parts of the city and precluded access to some of those key services. So I think that really was a wake-up call for some. Others now we're seeing this concept of everyone in their home. And I mean, the new battleground's the lounge room, I reckon. That's my, and that's not just B2B, that's B2C, that's also B2B as well, right? Is that because execs are at home and everyone, the whole thing now, that the lounge room is the battleground. Being able to get content and messaging to people at the right time is critical now for all organizations. So I think that's what's also driving this move to digital transformations, to e-commerce being a much more front and center part of people's lives.
Yeah, 2 questions, right? 2 questions. I mean, we're a smaller business than you guys. We're like, 40, 45 coaches, right? We noticed at the beginning of COVID, like a 10% correction, of work. And then it just kind of built up. And then we're actually bigger and stronger than ever. But you're a bigger organization. What were the commercial implications on Cognizant over the last 3-6 months? How have you seen it?
And it's probably been the hardest year of my professional life, I'd have to say. Because when you preside over so many staff, and you know that there's cuts that are made as part of that, and I think any consulting firm in any organization, and indeed a lot of our clients, went through this period or this trough where there was a lot of uncertainty, where there was some declining revenue numbers, and there was some real concern about what the outlook. And I think that was tough because there were layoffs made as minimal as possible, but there were layoffs made across all areas of the organization. And indeed, if you look across our industry, across the industry more broadly. So that was a challenging time. What's pleasing is that we seem to have very much rebounded from that. And I'm seeing sustained growth across APAC. So in Australia in particular is doing quite well, but across APAC, there's significant growth. So, I mean, all we can look at is probably a good litmus test for the market more broadly, right? Because we're across almost every industry, and so we can see which ones are in trouble and which ones are emerging in terms of new business models and in terms of needing to double down. You talk about digital transformation, accelerating. That is so true in certain sectors. So we're seeing it in mining, we're seeing it in insurance, we're seeing it in retail. So there's sectors that are absolutely growing at phenomenal rates in terms of how they're moving to advance their transformational goals. And then there are others that we're seeing that perhaps are not doing so well. So, yeah.
Have you seen the that 6 years faster and COVID's do you feel that you guys are being pulled in more now? Like is the demand there more than it was pre-COVID?
Yes, it is. What's interesting is the demand. It's more show me immediate results. So one thing I would say is that there's absolutely this concept of 12 months, spin up a project or a program and we'll evaluate it 2021. It's like, no, you've got 60 days, maybe POC, go from concept to cash. They want much faster return on investment. So they're doing smaller things, but they're doing more of them more quickly. And I think that's a great thing for more mature organizations. I think that there's still a problem at most enterprise levels are still struggling with their operating models and their funding models. And interestingly, they're incidentally, from the research, they're the two of the leading indicators of transformational failure. So people spin up projects or programs, they want to transform the company, they focus on e-commerce layers and creating experiences, wonderful, but they don't fix their target operating models, how they're going to work in the target state at the end, and they don't align their funding models accordingly. So they still have this idea of we want to be agile, and you would see it in your work as well. We want to do this innovation labs, and we're just going to release product every 60 days, and it's going to be wonderful. But they're still tied to business cases with 3-year ROIs on transformations, and it's like that's not going to work. And so we're still seeing some challenges there, but certainly people wanting faster ROI.
Yeah, I think the other thing that we see is people know the funding models, governance models, and the organizational design are a problem. They know it. But they don't know how to shift it. They don't know how to go from, hey, we've got a structure to no structure, or what's the middle ground, or we've got heavy finance gates to no finance gates. So I think organizations know they need to change those domains. And there's some really awesome CFOs or beyond budgeting CFOs. There's some really great organizational design people. And I think what companies are learning is they used to outsource a lot of that stuff. Like, hey, one of the big boys, come and do some organizational design for us. Now what they're realizing, they're like, oh, if we're going to change all the time, I can't outsource this to one of the big boys every 12 to 18 months. I've actually got to develop the skills internally to be able to rebust myself up. So I think that's where companies are up to. They can't do it yet, which is bloody frustrating, but they know that they've got to start learning how to do modified funding models and internal reorganization design themselves. So are exactly what they're up to.
Yeah, while still operating a business, right? And that's the thing. How do you changing while you're running 1 million miles an hour is the other challenge they've got, right? Because they've still got revenue targets they've got to hit and servicing needs for clients that they've got to maintain, and that's always a challenge as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Which reminds me, I'll share my screen again. There was a little. In the news that that Spielberg put in there. I'll show. I'm not too sure if you've seen that. I haven't seen it before, but I'll share it hopefully here. Have you seen this? Can you see my screen there? So here's a guy in a tuk-tuk. I'm assuming it's India or somewhere in Asia. And he decides to change his back tire while driving a fare.
Well, I love it. That's awesome.
What do you reckon, Matt? Like, have you ever seen companies? And I think that, you know, the capture is we need to do a core systems replacement, but we also need to continue delivering value.
Yeah, I think that sums it up, right? That's awesome. What balance?
And what's your view on that? Like, where's the balance, right? Because we all get that companies need to keep going. So where's the balance, do you think?
It's a great question. I think that companies need to be very careful about focusing too much on front-end experiences at the benefit of their core. I know that sounds a weird thing to say, right? But what happens, and the data plays this out, is that if you build front-end experiences without fixing the rest of your organization, fundamentally two things happen. You set up a value proposition with a client where they go, oh, this wonderful experience until the last few steps. And then it falls over because you couldn't fix your back end. Banks are in this situation at the moment. They have a very slick loaning experience until you get to the end, and then you've got to fax all your documents to them. And so that's because their back end process is so shit. They couldn't actually get the last mile of that experience right. And so that creates a more frustrating customer experience than if you didn't have that slick e-commerce experience at the front, because you created an expectation that you can't fulfill. Second problem is internally, staff morale goes down when you do that. And people go, well, why is that? You create a better customer experience at the front end. Why would staff morale go down? And the data kind of proved it was because the staff end up running around and being the glue that holds together your shitty back end processes that you couldn't get right. So they are the ones that are trying desperately to fulfill that value proposition you created with that front end experience. And so you've got to be very careful about doing too much in the front end without fixing your core, without reorganizing your labor force, and without actually creating that seamless experience end to end. So I think that's one absolute challenge. The other end is if you go the other way and you just spend too much time working on your core platform without building anything, you get overtaken in the market.
Yeah. So. I love the Vanguard method, which is, you know, which talks about releasing features, but not at the detriment of creating back-end problems. So, like, should you continue to be releasing more and more features out there, or should you actually be looking about how much work is done to the back end and clean the back end up, make that efficient?
Yeah, absolutely.
And the features. And I think some organizations out there are too orientated around new features, and all they're doing is building more and more tech debt at the back, more and more tech debt. And then they go, well, why do we have so many temps? Why is there so many processes? So, and it's because they're out of kilter. And
then they build more tactical processes to deal with it rather than optimizing it and actually putting, you know, some automation in, or actually investing in process optimization. Because that's less sexy than the front end new app, unfortunately. And if you go back to funding cycles, it's harder to get that over the line. And I just think that that's really where a lot of organizations, it's not just in Australia, I see this across all across APAC, but it's particularly prevalent in banking and finance, because they were kind of the first movers in getting those front end apps improved.
Cool. I mean, I can see the questions coming through. First of all, thanks, Matt. Obviously, I love just, you know, shooting in the breeze with you, right? A couple of white middle-aged men talking about process optimization there. Woohoo! On a Friday lunchtime. There you go, right?
Yeah.
I do have a couple of hard questions, right? I've got some hard questions. You ready for them?
Sure, why not? I better hang on. No, I got to stretch. Yeah.
I want you to go kick that back in a minute, right? Maybe not now, but maybe later. We'll check your form out.
It's not bad. Yeah. Just take my slippers off though. Anyway. Go, carry on.
All right. So a couple of questions for you, right? So and I'm sure they'll come up on the channel. I think I saw one already, and that is, you know, what's your biggest lesson you've learned from participating in multiple organizational disruptions? Like, what's being in a position where you get to participate in so many? What's the thing that comes to you to go, you're ready or you're not ready, or what's that inner learning that you've developed because you're so lucky to have that opportunity to see so many?
Yeah.
And I know there's lots in there, right? But
there's a lot.
Bubble up the big ones.
Right. Yeah. Okay. I'd say I'll give you two perspectives that just immediately come to mind. So we'll see where they go as concepts. If I take you on a tangent, I apologize. The first is similar to what I spoke about before, right? About operating model, and people, and I will keep banging on about this. People just have not got this right.
Yep.
Key indicator of failure. They haven't envisaged what the future state will look like. Why is that important? Well, because you're fundamentally going to redesign your labor force. If you start with the technology, you're going to find you got the wrong people in the wrong roles, and you haven't built it out properly, and you're never going to create those experiences with customers that you thought about. So getting that operating model right up front is important, because it determines the layer of people you need around, and you'll quickly find that you don't have all of the right people at the table. So you're going to need to bring some people in. Now, if you'd have done that up front, you would have made different decisions about your suppliers. So what typically happens is you go, we're going to build an e-commerce platform, or we're going to change an application, or we're going to change our middleware layer, and we'll go to tender and write an RFP and get a supplier in and do that stuff, and then that'll be built. But we don't make any decisions along the way about who we actually needed from a company side to be a part of that as our labor force. Now, if you spin that around and kind of go, what do we want to be when we're evolved this journey, or at least transforming ourselves, and never stops obviously, but when you transform, you at least get a new technology layer in, you'll make decisions about the roles that you need internally versus going to that RFP model where this whole thing's built for you, and then you're left with a technology that you can't really run. So getting that right is really important, because it fundamentally changes the kind of people you need in your organization. And we spoke about funding models before. That's one thing.
So also organizational design, funding models, right?
That's absolutely key.
Yeah.
The other one.
I look at the business agility domain, and I'm fascinated where everyone goes, learn how to do agile, learn how to do Scrum, but no one talks about learn how to do organizational redesign around objectives.
Yeah.
Like it's like what you want to, make this big machine be a little bit faster. Than, smaller, lots smaller. So totally. So that's one. Right?
But it's more than that, right? Because that you're changing the incentive structures, and if you're doing it properly, you're saying, well, how do we fundamentally value the work that the people do in the organization in that new business? How important is innovation? How important is engaging the customer in a dialogue? Yeah. And then how do we incentivize our team to do that? Which means you're breaking down not only hierarchies, but you're breaking down pay structures and incentivization models. And that's
absolutely.
You do that up front, then you got a chance with your transformation.
All right, got it. Great. So organizational design, I'm willing to challenge that one. What else bubbles up as big lessons you've learned from going into companies and doing lots of different digital disruptions?
Execs are generally smart people at what they do, but know very little about transformation. And it's really tough, because you want to shake them sometimes. You kind of go, look, you're really like a banker. You can see that they're incredibly good at what they've done, and they've been able to build their way up to an exec level within a bank. And there's always this sense of they have to know about transformation. And you look at them and go, you've never done a transformation in your life. Like we've done 20 this year. Like, listen, there's a few things here that you're going to stumble over. And there's this almost this inherent bias within themselves that they've been so good at their domain that they're used to knowing all the answers. And I think it's very confronting for them to kind of to understand that they don't actually know much about the transformation journey they're about to go on, but they need to be seen that they do. Yeah. And so it's almost like if you can get them over that hurdle of being vulnerable enough to kind of understand that they don't know enough, you can have a good conversation. And that's been the key learning. The transformations where I've succeeded and where we've been able to consult the best are the ones where you've had that really tough conversation up front. You've identified the roles that you're going to play as an advisor or a coach, and you've got really green leaders or other leaders that just want to advance the cause, and they don't have as much ego, and they're not as much invested as who gets the credit as long as the outcome is delivered properly.
Spot on, right? And that's why I love this concept of green leaders. I love the concept of it, because green leaders go, I know some good stuff, right? But ultimately, I don't know everything. And there may be some smarter people I need to kind of engage. The orange and the red leaders are the ones that are like, I know everything. I'm the boss. I'm going to do it my way. And then, and those two different paths that organizations take are just really, really different paths.
Sure. Absolutely.
One person got all the answers, and the other one going, no, I'm going to build a collective of smart people. And then ultimately, hey, I might make the call because I'm still a leader. It's not like I'm not going to make a call, but I'm open enough to be able to get the advice, to go, okay, so which is the right call to make in this situation?
Yeah, which goes back to that kind of opinion versus data-driven decisioning, right? And it's, yeah, there is still a bit of that going on. So I think that's been what I've seen, and that's across APAC and Middle East. So there's I see the same behavior in almost every country that we dip into, and it's great when you can find a green leader or someone that's more engaged or understands that they need help on that journey. And the interesting thing is every company needs different help, right? And I think the role of consulting companies changes with every client, and you should never go in with the same assumption that you're going to do the same thing with each client.
Yeah,
because they've got their own actors internally, and some know certain domains better than others. And rather than just trying to do a blueprint model the same every time, you got to go in and quickly identify. And that's, half of our job in the initial workshops we run with clients is finding who the champions are for the different domains and being like, right, she's going to be perfect to cover this, just empower her to do this, and then step away. And you can then quickly see where your gaps are going to be in the transformation. And that's where you focus your time.
Yeah, isn't it fascinating, right? Companies can want to go down this journey, but if they haven't got the right leadership mentality in place and the right cohort of leaders that actually have that ability, they're going to stuff it up a lot because they're just not willing to take advice and direction. So I totally agree. So the org design and leadership culture really is kind of the two big takeaways, right? Cool. All right.
With incentive structures, because incentive structures will drive the behavior, which then goes back to those people. If you activate them properly and incentivize them properly, you got a good chance.
All right. Here's a setup, Matt. Here's a setup, because you've told me some stories at the pub, right? We've been to the pub together before. What's the most honest thing you've directly said to a client?
The most honest. Yeah, there was. Well, I've said a lot of blunt things in my time. I've had a few. It's interesting.
You could take the client out of it, right? You don't have to say.
Oh no, I won't say the client. But there was a client that was just so off base, and I remember just saying he'd made a point about this is where the technology was going to go, and this is where they need to invest. And I basically said, have you considered the possibility that you're fundamentally wrong, and that this was on a conference call with the exec and probably half a dozen of his direct reports. And so that went down very like a lead balloon, but I at least had the fact to back up what I was saying, and we turned him around. But it was one of those like, bam. Because he'd gone on it was a mini rant, right? And he was passionate about it, and he was like, I get that he had an opinion, it was just flawed. So it was just bingo.
I love it.
So that was about as blunt as I've been. Although my boss said, I do remember my boss telling a story about a client we had where he was way off base in a meeting, and he'd said something along the lines of, he'd interrupted and said, can I ask a question? I responded with, no, you may not. We've still got to finish what we're talking about. But sometimes you got to keep them on track. But that's as blunt. Wow, that's a random question, but that's as blunt as it's been.
And I think clients love authenticity and genuine, and you're super genuine, and it's okay if we stuff it up, right? But as long as the intent is right and the genuineness, if even that's the word, is right. All right.
I feel like it should be a word. That
should be a word. Next question I have for you is, and then I want to jump to some Q&A questions. Is
okay.
What's the role of a digital agency like Cognizant? Like, what role do you play? And because I think there's a feeling out there that shouldn't companies just do it all themselves? Why should they even use you? Shouldn't they develop all these skills internally? Aren't you just stealing the money and grabbing it? What role do you see that you play?
Sometimes.
Where's the win-win? Tell us the role that you play where that they need you to be able to get through.
Some of them don't. It's such a broad question, right? Because every company is at a different stage of their journey. And so the idea of a consulting firm, any consulting firm for that matter, is coming in and supporting at the right stage of the journey. And a lot of the times that's actually enabling them to do stuff themselves. Go back to the early example about operating models. Some of these things, it's just about mobilizing, right? And helping them to get themselves set up and orientate themselves properly. And we're seeing a massive shift in insourcing. So what was traditionally a consulting role of, we'll come in, we'll shape something, we'll take out some outsourcing capability and we'll do it all for you somewhere in the cloud, somewhere far, far away. So now it's the conversations, well, what roles do you need to build internally? So I think modern consulting firms are just more adaptable. to the specific client needs. And you've got to be realistic about where the client is at a point in time.
Yep.
And so if you're with a client for say 3 years and you're doing the same thing, then that's not beneficial to anybody. That you should be evolving to as they're evolving, and ultimately you're keeping pace with them as they're changing. But I think it's really comes down to the need of the client at the time.
Yep.
And also looking at what we want to do. I mean, even Cognizant, there's business models we're exiting as well, because you've got to take a look at yourself. And there are things that we're consciously not doing because it just didn't fit with the strategic objectives.
Oh, that's interesting. Can you give me an example, like a high level example of like where
I can.
We don't want to play there anymore?
So Facebook moderation. So Cognizant was the largest provider. We service a lot of the global tech companies as well, right? And Facebook was one where we did Facebook moderation, and so we've consciously exited that business. And so there are two reasons for that. One is we need to find a better way of moderating content that doesn't involve people because of the real impact of people, right? So there's people that were sitting all day, every day, reviewing like some obscene content and making decisions about whether it should be allowed to be up on Facebook or not. So you imagine that the impact on a person that's spending all day, viewing that quite graphic content and blocking it so it doesn't get out into the public domain. That's really tough work. And we looked at that and went, that's not a business that we want to be in. We don't like to subject our people to that is not something we wanted to do. And subjecting anybody to that. Yeah. So the logic was exiting that business, investing and put some money into a foundation with some others to look at how we could automate that. So we would take the human element out of that, and could we do automation without people being involved? So that was an example of a service line where you would go, that's traditional outsourcing. Yeah. That would be, and there's hundreds of millions of dollars involved in that decision. Yeah. Right. So that's one example that comes to mind.
Yeah, good. And I like it. All right, shall we have a look at the Q&A, see what's in there? We've got a couple of questions. I think we've answered a few, to be honest. So I'll run through them. We can go over the top if we want to. So Mark asked, what do you see the biggest challenge with leaders? So I think we talked a little. The directors have the transformation. The leaders who have the transformation problem, and I think we talked about like the ones who are open and the ones who are not. The green leaders to the orange leaders. Anything else you want to add to that? That's the biggest challenge, I think.
And also I see it quite a lot where they had a good experience with the technology, and then they just keep wanting to use that one, and they kind of go like, but I really liked SAP in this, and you're like, that's cool, but you're not in that job anymore. You've moved on 2 companies, and the rest of the stack it doesn't make sense to put that one in. But why do you still say that? So, but I liked it, and so there's that inherent bias in every individual to go back to something that they know and they liked, or they touched and it worked in one scenario. And so unpicking that sometimes is a journey, shall we say.
Yeah. All right. The other question we've got is, Varun, what's your strategy on achieving success with hybrid journeys? So uplifting core platforms while also enhancing customer experience. So you talked before about not to being too customer focused. So what's your strategy? What's your view?
Of how you do it successfully? Well, no one's done it.
Of a hybrid journey approach, right?
So the hybrid journey is another one. There's actually 4 models. I spoke about the 2, the CX and the core platform. The other one is hybrid journey, and then there's blue sky. You build it new. So they're the 4 ways to transform. So I might as well talk about the other 2. The hybrid models is good, but the switching cost, you've got to be very diligent. Because what you're doing in the hybrid model is you're doing some core platform and some experience. Yeah. So it sounds so logical, right? But it's actually the one that is the most expensive and certainly has the biggest impact on your people, because you're pivoting between a front-end experience and a back-end experience. And so if you have a highly disciplined organization, you'll get through. But it's very, very difficult. And it's the one that fails the most because of the switching costs associated with building something for the front end and building. And there's this concept of a shard. Can you go from the front to the back end? Yeah, great. Yeah, it's a wonderful concept. Even the word shard, it sounds great, right? But how do you do that with 200 applications and data and a whole bunch of, it's a great on a PowerPoint slide, but to actually do that properly, very complex, takes a very disciplined client. So
do you think there's a higher chance of success by just going greenfields and going, hey, we've got
interesting, which leads to the fourth example. That's the fourth way you can do a transformation is greenfields. Build it again. Fintechs are doing that. So some of the new age banks are trying to do that. Now, the biggest issue with that is you create this new culture in this new, so let's call it, I'm picking on banks today, but let's say it's a fintech product, right? But
hey, listen, they've been picking on us for years, right? It's about time we got back at them.
Well, no, it's because they're doing it. So we're getting the best learnings from them. So this is the thing, they're more advanced in their thinking because they've had to evolve, right? So they're doing these greenfields concepts. And the issue is when you create a new brand and you create something in the cloud and greenfields, you create a culture around that. Now, the biggest issue is when you take all of your people from the old culture and the old way of working and you try and put them in. And that's where the failure occurs because the two worlds really don't come together as well as you would expect. And so the challenges that they're finding is how do I bring the value prop of what I had of the old business into this new greenfields? So the overarching point is those are the four ways. None of them have all succeeded. I'll share some of the MIT research on this. I'll give the link and you can share it out later if you like. But it's
that'd be great. I mean, one of the things that
really
I've
interesting
seen on the greenfield stuff, I've done quite a bit of work there. As you say, they bring the old people across and they come with all this baggage from their old world because they're like, oh, that's really complex because in the old world that was complex. They don't actually think of it from a greenfield perspective. What I've seen is there's a lack of product management and experience in the new world. Like that whole product management domain is just immature. I would almost say globally, this is not about being good at agile anymore, right? This is about having bloody good ideas that you can take from strategy to implementation and do it fast. So you've got to have really good product managers. And if you have average product managers, everything else is a bit of a shit show, to be honest, right? Everything is aligned behind that direction. If that direction is not the right direction, then you're bleeding, really.
Yeah, but also pulling in the other areas of the business into those agile squads. We're still seeing mixed success with, marketing being properly embedded and, your customer service functions in there and some of your legal and risk teams being involved. I mean, again, it's still a work in progress.
Of course, but I would argue that's because you don't have the right, either the leads in place or the product management in place, setting the vision, right? So, because once you've got the vision, I don't care what you are, if you're marketing, legal, technology, right? You've got the vision. The issue is if the vision doesn't stack up, everyone's like, well, that doesn't make sense.
Agree. Then the second problem, and assume you get that right. The second problem is then if you don't incentivize people that way. So the best vision in the world falls apart when people still go, but I'm not KPI to do that.
That's right, yeah.
And that's what happened. I won't mention the bank, but that's what happened. They stood it up, but they didn't align everyone's KPI. So there was still a sense of, well, I like the vision, but I can't connect to my own day-to-day way of being measured. Yeah. And so that's fundamentally where it falls over.
We have we get to work with a couple of customers, and the ones that we love working with are literally setting up brand new buildings to start brand new greenfield operations out of to build brand new cultures. And they're the ones that you just turn around and go, oh, I mean, it's serious investment, but this is serious business, right? Tack around the edges of an old culture, build something new with the old people, or build something new with new people with a clear vision and direction. All right, thank you.
Well, I mean, look at COVID. We're seeing that now with the reality that buildings are going to change, right? The whole nature of the work experience is going to be completely different.
Yeah.
So we're fundamentally thinking about how our own buildings need to be used, right? And they're going to be more around collaboration spaces and less around workspaces.
Yeah.
So there's some really interesting research on that happening at the moment.
All right, so thanks, Kakil and Varun for your questions. Carl, do you find among your clients a waste difference in understanding or a vast difference, I think it's what to say, of understanding what digital transformation actually even means?
Yep. I think so. Some people still think it's just a bit of technology. I think that's you've probably seen that a few times where they go, well, look, we'll just buy a software package and we'll plug it in and we'll be done. Or maybe it means we just need a new website. Mm-hmm. So I think that's really where some clients are still on that, stage of the journey. If you think about it, there's a few waves, right? It started with, we're going to build some e-commerce experiences. That was kind of wave one. And then we went, okay, well, we need to think about how we can do some personalization and bring, some marketing automation into that experience. And then wave three was, well, okay, how do we need to re-engineer our our rest of our organization. When we talk about target operating models, we talk about organizational design. That's the third wave that I see emerging. Very few companies are really tackling that. Most are still in the stall zone of between 1 and 2.
Yeah, and it's fascinating, right? Like, that's just education, right? Like, why aren't companies just getting people in to educate them? You don't have to do it even, but just educate, get on the same page about where you're up to on the journey. All right, we've got 10 minutes, Maddie. We've talked for most of us. I want to hit some of these questions. There's good questions in here. Greg said, haven't heard your speaker yet of board engagement to help drive change. How often and in what ways do you engage with the board?
Yeah, as often as we can, and different clients will pull people in, and others are more reluctant to, right?
Yeah.
There's again, looking at how digital savvy your board is an interesting way of evaluating, and there's some emerging research that's being done into looking at the maturity of the board members and evaluating how digital savvy they are, and using that as a leading indicator of transformational failure or success.
Yeah.
And so that's that research is just emerging at the moment. MIT had a paper on that late last year, and so that's the next wave of thinking, where we're looking at how do we engage early with boards and look at helping to set direction and things like that. And that's not just Cognizant; that's a lot of firms are trying.
Yeah, I've had a few different experiences. One, I've been engaged with a customer because the board said they had to go agile. So I was like, hey, we need Epic in here. We have to do this business agility.
Yeah, great.
I was like,
put on your cape.
But the board told us we had to do it. I was like, okay, this is interesting. That's one. The other thing that I've used a little bit, just to answer that question, Greg, is I'm a big fan of Michael Sahota and his certified agile leadership work. And he talks about building adapters. So sometimes, and the board's a great example, you just got to build an adapter from an agile world into the board. And that doesn't mean you've got to change them, because they will change when they change, but just building the adaptation, because they're so used to working in a particular way, and then wait for them to go, actual fact, can I pull a little bit more? Can I learn a little bit more? We've got one client who the boards would jump into showcases. So they'll jump into their innovation showcases as board members. We've had to coach them on their level of questioning, because they are board members, and they're usually pretty direct. They're like, why is this? And where's the value? And it's like, hey, you can come to our showcases. Just be really polite with the way you ask your questions, because people are scared of you. So it's definitely getting more integrated. It's not there, and we have to have adaptation, but it's definitely connecting more.
Yeah, it sounded like you said adaptation, but it sounded like you were building an integration layer between the board, where you're like you're translating between them.
Blah 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 blah.
Yeah, what they said was digital is good. Yeah, fair enough. Fair enough.
All right, Hermione, how do you get executives to accept that they don't know everything and they need advice from transformers? How do you get past their egos to assist with transformation? All right, Hermione, the $1 million question.
Yeah, look, it's a little bit of tough love and charisma, I think, is how the balance I've tried to personally strike, is that you've got to know what you're talking about, but I think you've got to be like upfront and have some blunt conversations early on. And I kind of spoke about that earlier today. Like that's genuinely, you face it all the time. And there's some meetings of, you've been having the conversation, you go, like, I literally just jumped off a call where I had to do the same thing with another exec in your industry. It's like, there's a world of research out there and a world of concepts that are not your own. You got to try and slowly impart them and look, try and give them some data points to latch onto, to kind of see that there's some science behind what you're talking about, and try and make it a space where they don't feel a threat. That's always the challenge, I find. But look, I would say probably that problem was worse 18 months to 2 years ago. There are, I think, more modern leaders coming into some of these positions, and we're seeing a lot of reshuffling in organizations, particularly in ANZ, where you don't have to explain that you've got to go to cloud. You don't have to talk to them about microservices and loosely coupled integrations. And obviously we're not going to build the whole thing. And yeah, of course you're running agile. Like, so some of the basics that potentially 2 years ago you were educating execs on, there's a general understanding in the market that those are the fundamentals or guiding principles of how you do the transformations. And so what I'm seeing is it's less about those fundamentals, and it's more about some of the softer things we talked about around org design, around change, and around the cultural elements, and about incentivization of your team and your leadership group. Those are the next areas of debate.
Yeah, I love the question, Hermione. I love it, right? it's a challenge. And I actually think we have a role to play. So I feel that if we go in as change agents, transformers, whatever language you want to do, and we come in there from a very righteous perspective, we lose them. Our job is to come with the right intent and come from a real educational perspective to go, hey, there's stuff out there. Take it or leave it. Sometimes you just got to walk away. And then they'll go, actual fact, right? Because you can't shove this stuff down people's throat if they're not ready. But if you come in, turn around and go, you should know this, or, that behavior is the wrong behavior, you just lose them. So you've got to turn around, I think, just come from the right intent and share information and then walk away if you don't get, if your EQ says they're not in, then get out.
Yeah. And so it's spot on. One of the things that we're doing more and more of is, they're almost half-day design thinking workshops before we even engage properly with a client. So we'll, particularly when we're going into a new area of a business and we're looking at starting up another piece of work, we'll try and do a half-day workshop to unpack the problem with them. We've got a framework that we use around design thinking to try and crystallize the problem, some solutions, and then build a roadmap. But the other thing we're doing there is understanding the personality types of the people in the room. Right. So, or in this case, digitally, so we can get a sense of what are they like? How are they engaging with our process? Are they leaning in? Are they resistant? And so you can see from that, and very quickly, you spend 4 hours with a group of execs. You can you see the personalities, you see the interplay, you see the way certain people will defer to others, the language that they're using gives you some really good insights into the kind of organization that you're about to embark on a transformational journey with. And so all those things help you unpack.
Cool. We're 3 minutes to go. What do you want to do? Should we pull another question, or do you want me to ask you some questions?
I don't mind. Did you have a good question you want to ask?
I love bantering you because we can banter in so many different directions, and we're both problem solvers, right? So it's like, how do we solve the problem as organizational transformation, right? And that's probably about one of the biggest problems there is. I think
there's heaps in the market.
My question to you, mate, is what's your biggest frustration? Like you've been doing this for a while. Like we've been doing this for a while. You get to play in lots of spaces. I think now you're really lucky because you get to play in spaces that are fun. But what's your biggest frustration?
The speed that the capabilities are changing versus the speed at which organizations are going. And what I mean by that is you got to be really careful at understanding the changing landscape of the technology, because it's almost outdated. Every conversation you have with a client, they're always behind the technology, and more we're being asked to predict not the technology they should have now, but what they need in the future. And so that's the frustration, because even when you think you've got a sense of the technology, their buying cycles are still so far behind. So I feel like there's a widening gap, and that's a frustration, because it means whatever they're doing now is wrong, and so it's about helping them align to where we think the technology is going. That's really frustrating. The other is talent, the absolute just need for really highly skilled people that are more than just a single domain SME. Creative technologists or human-centered designers, people that understand both the business and technology side of the problem. Like there's just a real lack of talent in that space, and so we're finding with our squads we can't expand beyond the capacity we've got because we can't get the right people in certain areas.
Yeah, I agree. I always find it interesting, like awesome people love working with awesome people, and they go, oh, that person's awesome. Where people who are not so awesome, they'll go, they're awesome, but they've got all these problems. But awesome people just love hanging out with awesome people, right? So the talent pool is a pool, but you've got to get the right people who want to work with each other. Matt, we're on time. I was told we had to finish on time. But I love hanging out with you, buddy. You're the kind of guy that invigorates me and liberates me, and we can throw ideas around, and you're super open and things like that. So hopefully after this call, you don't have to go punch the punching bag, or maybe you could punch it on the way out. Maybe that could be the close.
I'm going to punch my punching bag.
Yeah, you'll kick it. Are you going to pull a muscle if you kick it?
No, not at all. You do a kick, I might lose my headphones. But the key thing, it's could I teach you something? Maybe not.
What we'll do, everyone on the call, thank you for joining. Thank you for the questions. Matt, thanks for your time, buddy. We'll send a follow-up email after this just with, anything we talked about and any topics that came up with there. We'll share some stuff for Matt. But, the aim of this session is just to, show people what green leadership looks like. Matt, you're doing an awesome job, buddy. Keep going on the journey. And if you want any more information from Matt or myself, please reach out.
Yeah, thank you all.
Awesomeness.
Take it easy, all.
See you, buddy.
See you later.